Hey, welcome back to Coin Flip. I'm Derek Wu, and today's episode starts with something that's actually gotten my attention this week. The odds on a Fed rate hike have been sitting flat for weeks. Nobody was talking about it. And then, out of nowhere, they spiked. We're talking a jump from practically nothing into real contention right before the Fed's meeting on July 29th. I'll walk through what's actually moving those numbers and why I don't think this is a moment to panic. After that, we get into why the Fed itself looks split heading into this meeting. Their own rate projections are pulling in different directions. Hot inflation data is pushing one way, a weak jobs report is pulling the other. That tug-of-war affects your mortgage, your savings, your credit card rate, all of it. Which gets me to the part of the show I care about most, what you actually do with your money while the Fed figures this out. Because you don't need to predict the outcome. You need a plan that works no matter which way it breaks. I'll give you the exact move I'm making with my own cash before July 29th hits. Spoiler, it involves a savings account, a CD ladder, and zero guessing. The boring answer is usually the right one. All right, let's start with that Fed odds jump because the story behind it is better than I expected.
Okay, sit with this number for a second. 46.5%. That's where prediction markets landed on a Fed rate hike this month. A few weeks ago, that number was sitting in the single digits. According to Polymarket, that's the Fed decision in July market, and it swung harder than almost anything we've tracked this year. Now, I know what you're thinking. Rate hike odds, single digits, 46%? Sounds like inside baseball, something for bond traders to argue about on TV. But stick with me because this actually touches your savings account, your CD, maybe your mortgage rate if you're shopping for one. Here's the setup. Finance Calendar has the Fed meeting locked for July 28th and 29th. Right now, the federal funds rate sits at 3.5 to 3.75%. And every meeting so far this year, a hike wasn't really on the table. It was background noise. Traders priced in a hold and moved on with their lives. This is the first meeting where that's not true anymore. Polymarket's numbers jumped right after Fed Governor Christopher Waller made hawkish comments, and the market reaction was immediate. So what do you do with that? Honestly, nothing dramatic. When odds swing this much, this fast, that's not a reason to panic and start guessing where rates land next month. That's the market telling you, pay attention. Think about it this way. A coin landing heads 90% of the time isn't interesting. A coin that just jumped from 10% to almost 50%, that's a coin worth watching. So the real question isn't whether the Fed hikes. It's why the data got everyone flipping their forecasts this hard, this fast. Building on that swing, let's talk about why the Fed itself is split. The clearest sign is the June dot plot. 9 of 19 Fed officials now project at least one hike before the year's out. The dot plot is just each official's private guess for where rates should land plotted anonymously. 9 of 19 is basically the room split right down the middle. And you can see why they're torn. May's CPI report showed inflation running at 4.2% year over year, hotter than anyone wanted. A big piece of that came from energy. Costs jumped 23.5%, tied largely to tension in the Middle East. So that's one arm pulling the Fed toward a hike. Inflation's running hot, and energy's the accelerant. Now, the other arm. June's jobs report added just 57,000 jobs. That's soft, genuinely soft. For a few weeks, that number actually cooled hike odds down, made a hold look more likely. Then Governor Waller spoke up, hawkish tone, and odds jumped right back. CryptoBriefing.com even flagged Polymarket odds touching 60% for a hike this year at one point, separate from the July-specific number we opened with. Picture the Fed standing between two people pulling on opposite arms, one side yelling, "Inflation's out of control, hike now," the other yelling, "Jobs are cracking, don't you dare." That's why nobody, not traders, not economists, not me, can call this meeting with confidence. Hot CPI says hike, soft jobs say hold. Waller says hike again. It's genuinely a toss-up, and that's rare for this Fed. Normally, these meetings are boring. You can see the decision coming a mile away. Not this one. Both sides of the data are shouting, and the committee split roughly down the middle. And this tug-of-war isn't just a policy story. It flows straight into your bank account. Every basis point they debate touches the rate sitting on your actual savings, and that same tug of war is about to show up in your savings and CD accounts. Building on that tug of war, let's talk about your actual bank account. Right now, Fortune's Rate Tracker has top high-yield savings accounts paying up to 4.50% APY, and top CDs sitting around 4.40%. Not bad numbers. But here's what's wild. Those rates have already been drifting down this year, even with the Fed sitting still since January. Why would rates move if the Fed hasn't touched anything? Think of it like a scoreboard before the game even starts. Banks aren't pricing in what the Fed did, they're pricing in what they think the Fed's about to do. So if traders start betting on a hold or even a cut down the road, banks quietly trim their CD offers in advance. You don't get a memo, the number on the app just creeps lower. Now, flip that around. If the Fed actually hikes on July 29th, don't expect an instant jump in your savings APY, but you'd likely see CD and savings rates tick back up later this year as banks catch up to the new reality. If the Fed holds instead, rates probably keep that slow drift downward. And look, I get the instinct here. Some of you are thinking, okay, so I should just wait until July 29th, see what Powell's committee decides, then move my money. Don't do that. That's the exact kind of overthinking this show exists to shut down. You're trying to time a decision that even the Fed's own dot plot can't agree on internally. 9 of 19 officials for a hike, remember? If they can't call it, you definitely shouldn't be sitting on cash waiting for certainty that isn't coming. Waiting for the right rate is like waiting for the right time to start flossing. There isn't one. You just start. So what do you actually do with money sitting in a checking account earning basically nothing while this plays out? There's a move that works no matter which way Powell's group breaks on the 29th. Let's get into what that actually looks like.
Building on that, let's talk about what you actually do with your money before July 29th.
Okay, let's land the plane on this one. Today was about a coin that suddenly got interesting. A rate hike that nobody was pricing in a few weeks ago just jumped into real contention. That's the whole story in one sense. And here's why it matters for you, not just for traders watching a screen. The Fed being split, hawks pointing at hot inflation, doves pointing at a soft jobs report. That split is the actual risk, not the headline number itself. When the people setting rates don't agree, you shouldn't pretend you know more than they do. That's the lesson today. So what do you actually do with that? You don't try to outguess 9 divided Fed officials. You build a setup that works either way. Cash you might need soon stays liquid, sitting in a high-yield savings account earning something instead of nothing. Money you can actually lock up gets spread across CDs, some short-term, some medium, so you're not betting the whole pile on one outcome. Does that make sense? You're not predicting July 29th. You're making sure July 29th can't hurt you. Look, I flip actual coins on this show for the decisions that don't matter. This isn't one of those. But the fix for it genuinely boring. Ladder your savings, keep your cash liquid, move on with your week. If you made a call this week, even a small one, even just opening a high-yield account instead of leaving cash sitting there, that's a win. Seriously. Go subscribe so you're set for whenever the Fed actually decides. And if you've got a money decision you're stuck on, drop it in the reviews. I might just flip a coin on it next week and settle it for you live. We'll be watching what happens on the 29th. If the odds keep climbing, we'll be back on it. If they fade, we'll tell you that too. No spin either way. Thanks for spending this time with me. I know rate decisions and dot plots aren't exactly thrilling, but knowing when to pay attention and when to shrug and go about your day, that's the actual skill here. So build the ladder, keep the cash liquid, and stop refreshing prediction markets every hour. Go live your life. I'm Derek Wu. This has been Coin Flip. Catch you next time.